So I also did my post-graduation in management after spending about 8 years, on the job. And then while being on the job, I did this PGSCM, which IIM Bangalore, I think they still offer it now. So I do understand your predicament. I mean, it used to be a Friday half-day class for us and Saturday full-day class. It used to go all the way till I think 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, I don't exactly recall. And if it helps you to stay awake, feel free to ask questions. There's no stupid question. Every question is very valid. And only these rockets kind of scared me. Okay. So I just peeped into the desk to see if there are any rockets lying around. So I didn't find any, so that's feeling a bit safe. Okay, so all right. So I was asked by Shreyas to talk about how does product management work in a B2B space. So I've kind of put some slide together to put the whole story. And because this is academics, you would have taught several frameworks and several philosophies. So it's a lot of theory. So I thought it would be good to recollect some of the theory which I learned when I was doing my management study, and also what I've read through my career so far, and see if I can connect so that it becomes a bit more both a match between the theory and how it's put in practice when you actually go out and work on a product. So again, a lot of these are my what shall I say, impression, my understanding, my learning. I'm also a student, and so nothing is very perfect. So if you have a different opinion, feel free to share it, and we can always discuss. So I think my introduction has already been done by Shreyas. I'm basically a techie at heart, even today, and I do a product management job. So you can call me a confused techie and a raw product manager. Everything suits well. And it helps. The product manager, especially in a high technology industry, or for that matter, any industry, you got to have a good understanding of the product. You got to talk to the engineers and be able to talk in their wavelengths and understand what does it take to address a customer's pain point, and also talk to the customer and say what exactly is their pain point, because your role is to see how you can meet a customer's need in a profitable manner, right? I mean, everybody wants to meet the customer's need, but if the implementation of that is extremely prohibitive and the the way customer values that is not very high, you end up doing a lot of work which costs a lot of money, but you can't really charge a premium. But at the same time, if you flip it around and say, hey, there is a huge customer problem, but solving that is not a big deal, not a problem. It is something you can do it in a reasonable amount of cost. So that is where the whole skill set of product management comes into the picture. So you got to have a good flair of technology, good flair of market, good flair of business, good flair of money, the finances. So that kind of shapes up a good product management role. So, and it's not a difficult job. I mean, it's not something which is out of the world. If you see people who have really shown in the business today, they're basically techies. You take Steve Jobs, you take Michael Dell, Michael Dell is mostly a business guy. You take Satya Nadella, for example. All very strong techies who've and in Google, the head of Google. I mean, he was a manager himself for a brief while, came into getting the company. So if you have a strong knowledge about the product, if you have a strong knowledge about how to get it to a shape that the market is going to like, that's really going to be a big plus for you. So views are personal. Again, this is based upon my experience in HPE, but my views are not necessarily that of HPE's. I've used only the public information of what is available in the open domain, and talks refer to several industry-wide studies and some of the lot of theoretical framework. Large enterprise customers are assumed here. We are not talking about consumer products. We're not talking about the mobile phone, stuff like that. We're talking about primarily B2B segment. What I'm more comfortable with is the server space and the enterprise software. So these are the expectations that Shreyas sent me over email. How different is product lifecycle for other products compared to B2C, especially when release vehicles are longer and customers are not going to upgrade soon? Fair question. How customer insight happens as a PM, what insight you get from customers and through what channels. How partner management works, what are challenges in it, how decisions on closing product lines are made and what challenges you faced, okay, and how external acquisitions affect product roadmap. Okay, the last I don't necessarily have a strong experience on. I've not seen that very closely either, but I can probably answer some questions on what I've observed. But the first four, maybe I can tell you, how I see it. Any other question? I believe this question was collated from this class. Any other question?
Maybe something on the product marketing perspective. On the reaching out to, particularly on the B2B space.
Okay.
B2C space is a lot of literature is already available.
Okay.
Space, how do you reach out to the companies? Explain to that.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. Thanks.
Do you consider user experience in preparing your product server?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's very important. So no matter whether it's a consumer product or an enterprise product, user experience matters a lot. The difference is that in the case of an enterprise product, your users are basically two types. One are the people from the backend, the admin, the system administrators, and all those people. And the others are people who actually do the job. If you are an ERP product, it's people who actually use your solution to place the orders, place supply chain. They're all employees. So the mass base is not very high. Whereas if it's a consumer product, the mass base can be extremely high, and it can be your social media can be a boon or a bane. I mean, people talk about it a lot, and people actually base a purchase decision on. In the consumer product, they base a purchase decision mostly on what they see on social media, whereas that is not that big a challenge in the enterprise. But user experience does matter in both the cases.
What are some of the frameworks that you use for use case?
I will come to about the. Yeah. So if it is engineering, agile is becoming more and more popular in terms of development, product development. We don't have a lot of UI products, so some of the frameworks which you use in developing the UIs is not something we use inside of the Nonstop Enterprise division. But there are a lot of good frameworks available, be it enterprise or consumer, for developing the UI products. That's the front end part.
Coming at that structure of designing plus startup plus
Okay. No, I think, well, at least in the one that I have been involved with, we don't use a framework like PACE. We are very engineering focused, and it was primarily a waterfall model, and now it's taking the agile is now taking over to a large extent. Yes, please.
Especially with B2B.
Yeah.
The product manager follows steady questions.
Absolutely.
Everything is a subscription model, right? And licensing.
Yeah.
So that's roadmap of functionality.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind, and there was something exactly.
Yeah, I'll go through my slides and see whether that addresses your question. And towards the end, if it doesn't, yeah, we'll come back. Okay. Yeah.
So also to do product management from India for global company. That is the question. Because most of the companies have a product management in place.
Yeah. Yeah.
As headquarters.
Yeah.
But how is it like moving from here?
Okay. Great question. Well, see, product manager does form a pivotal role in the entire life cycle of the product after the product launch, right? I mean, of course, the product until product launch, it's a back-end job. You do the design, you look at what are the features you want to implement, what factors you would keep in mind, and so forth. But as you go closer, once you talk to the customers, once you talk to the field, once you talk to the sales. I mean, large enterprises, the sales, there is a complete organization which does sales of your product, and it's worldwide. And each geography has their own ways of doing things. And primarily, we are a US-based company. I mean, half of our revenue comes from the US. So there is this challenge in terms of, hey, this guy is not available to me when I'm working, and I want to call him, but he's not available. He's in a different work zone. So it does become a challenge, to the extent that companies sometimes who have tried getting product management done out of India and China and other geographies have actually even taken a stand and say, look, I want to get at least the product management over. I don't mind engineering happening in these countries, but I want product management to happen back in the US, because it's becoming too difficult for me to actually get this done offshore. So that challenge does exist, and this has happened in HP as well. And of course, in our business, it hasn't happened, at least not as yet. But I've seen that happening. Now, I think your second question was, what is the second part of your question? How much control, how much ownership you have? Well, I have full ownership. Now, again, you got to earn it. When you start with it, you don't get it. And what I have observed is that the companies, especially the US companies, are very open, and they treat you for your merit. If you are really good at a certain job, and if you can demonstrate that you can actually come up to the expectation, you get it. There is no, hey, this is happening in India, can I trust him with all the responsibilities and all the sensitive information? That is not the case.
Not that,
Yeah.
When by say companies come to technical product manager role in India, the
Yeah.
product manager is in the US.
Yeah.
So you kind of differentiate. That's the version.
Yeah, so I have seen both the roles. At least in HPE, we didn't have this technical product manager, but in one of the earlier organizations, there was a role called technical product manager. I did that role, and so I know what you're talking about. I take in custom the company's philosophy. HPE has not done that. I don't think HPE has got a role called technical product managers. Whether they are in India or in the US, they are full-fledged product managers. They've got full responsibility, and so forth. Now, there are some organizations where product management actually owns the P&L. We haven't reached that stage. Now P&L is still owned by the business general management and all that. Product management still is more like an associate function. Now, is it good or bad? Of course, it's got positives and negatives. And if the ownership means, do I own a P&L to my product line? I don't. Of course, when they run the P&L, am I answerable to what happens in my product line? Of course, I'm answerable. That's the ownership part. Okay.
So you work with the business development team in getting the features and prioritizing the roadmap. And
no, I work with the business development team, so the way we are structured is that we have the business unit inside of HPE, and then we have the customer account teams. And the customer account teams have got the technical function, which we call as pre-sales, the solution architects, and the sales function. So these are all large accounts. They're all people who order us, millions of dollars every year. So we don't directly talk to the customer. So they basically understand what the customer needs, and they flow in what is it that the customers require, and that we kind of consider. But we do have, if we require, we do get into customer discussions, and we do directly talk to the customer. And the other area where we actually do this is we have a lot of these events happening. When in the large enterprises, the marketing, and somebody asked about marketing. If you a large product line, billions of dollars, we have these worldwide events, and you participate in that. That is a good opportunity for you to talk to the customers and directly understand what is it that is making them use your product. So as a good product manager, more than what the customer need, you also need to understand why is it he's buying the product, why is it still paying you license revenue, why is it still paying you support revenue, right? That's important because that's your current cash cow that is going to sustain you. So use that forum to actually understand Of course, you need the other dimension, which is the competition, the technology evolution, and all that. That is what eventually flows into your product decision. Yeah.
Another thing that is as a product manager for the stakeholders and critical ones, how do you manage?
Yeah.
That's based with so many of them.
Yeah.
Who were the critical ones and how do you suggest to manage them?
Okay. So I'll probably go through my slides, and then again, if it doesn't answer, we'll come back to that question. Good question. Okay. So, all right. So let me go through a few slides. Again, starting with the frameworks. You all would have learned about the Porterian model, Porterian 5 forces. So what are they? So if in an environment, what are the 5 forces? Power of buyers, power of sellers, power of substitutes, internal competitors, industry competitors. Okay, so if you look at an enterprise product, if you're looking at products which are typically 100,000, 200,000, 500,000, 1 million kind of products. So there is one factor which that you need to keep in mind are the influencers. Remember, we are talking about products where the decision making is extremely complex. It is not a mobile phone where you get a lot of specs. You go to all these websites which compare, mobile phone A versus the other, or I'm taking mobile phone as an example because it's a classic consumer product, right? Whereas here, the complexities of the product is fairly high, so there is a very rigorous buying process, and there are a lot of influencers that matter here. Now, who are those influencers? Value chain partners. A lot of these companies don't sell directly to the end customers, especially if it's, let's say, which how many servers do people buy every quarter worldwide? It runs into hundreds of millions. So you really possibly can't directly go and sell this to the customer. So you need these VARs, value-added resellers, right? If you are selling a middleware or if you are selling an operating system, you need people to actually develop solutions on it. The reason why I can't move Microsoft out of their vertical is because there are so many solutions out there, and they don't want to move so easily. So I can't move IBM mainframe because there are so many solutions out there. So your ecosystem becomes very important. Your partners become very important. People who develop solutions on your product, people who sell your product as an appliance, right? I mean, let's say I have Accenture or I have Infosys or a Wipro who actually consult customers. I mean, I have my managed service which I outsource to IBM, and the customer is always going to tell IBM, look, here is what my goals for you are, and you decide how you want to implement it, right? So they become extremely powerful. They become your partner. They become your resellers. So they become your system integrators. So at the end of the day, you got to cater to them, even though your end customer could be an AT&T or a Bharti Airtel or a Reliance. You don't have a direct access to them. You go to them through their system integrators. You go to them through their service providers. You go to them through people where they purchase the end solutions from, the appliances. That's one sort of ecosystem. The other one is the analysts. There are these big analysts, very well-known analysts, the IDCs, the Gartners, and there are a few others, right? Now, have you heard of this Gartner's Magic Quadrant? Right? What does it tell you? What are the 4 boxes in the Magic Quadrant? The visionaries, the leaders. So Gartner's Magic Quadrant has got 4 boxes. So what are the two dimensions they measure you on? Innovation, execution, right? Mark you on whether you are a great innovator or you are a great executor, and the one who actually does good in both, they become leaders. So now that's a great example of influencers, right? If a CIO is sitting in his office and he wants to implement, let's say, a cloud solution, a private cloud solution in his enterprise. So what will you do first? He will look at these journals, he will look at this analyst report and says, now who are the players in this, right? What's the maturity of their solution? So it is important that you work with them, you position your product, and you make sure that your product gets in there. And that's extremely crucial, especially if it is a B2B environment, if it's a B2B market, because your CIOs are going to be watching that, they're going to reading that. Have you heard of this great IBM campaign called "Nobody Has Been Fired Because of Purchasing IBM"? Have you heard of this? There was an IBM marketing campaign which happened in the 2000s. It's basically, they're actually telling the CIOs, you buy my product, it is something which is a winner. You're not going to get fired because of it. So why is he saying that? Remember, the CIOs are extremely accountable. If a project goes bad, because CIO decided because this is something which is cheaper, I can make it, I can save 10%, 20% by going to another vendor. IBM is telling them, don't do those decisions because my product will help you meet your requirement. And when you are talking about 5 nines availability, 7 nines availability, and so forth, extremely bulletproof operating system, bulletproof system, what does it mean? You can't hack it. Nobody can enter into it. That's when these big guys like the IBMs and the Ciscos and all these people come and say, look, you buy my product, it's actually expensive, I know, but you're not going to fail. So you can see a touch of arrogance in that, but it's actually a marketing strategy of a lot of these large guys. They actually show how some vendors can actually place a nice balance between arrogance and marketing, and tell the CIOs that, threaten the CIOs that you buy my product or you shall not switch off from my product. Because you do that and something goes wrong, you're going to lose your job, right? The analysts become very important. Regulatory bodies, right? I mean, we know that with Huawei, what the regulatory body can play havoc in the industries. Regulatory bodies are very important. One of these industries, financial services, for example, or healthcare, they're highly regulated industries, verticals. And there we have these regulations such as PCI DSS, HIPAA, and all sorts of regulations. And if you have to play in that industry, you got to make sure you go through all the certifications. And some of the criteria, they just put you completely out of the picture. For example, the US new regulation that you can't do business with China or business with some of the vendors in China like Huawei. It actually can take you out of the market. Yes, please.
On the regulatory part, the organization have dedicated entities or who specialize in that as a product manager, just to consult them, or you need to know them for every country that you organize?
Good question. So we have a group called Global Trade inside of HPE. So if we have to make a product, we got to go through this product classification, and the global trade people actually understand which country will require what kind of certification, and they will, because for them, when the product goes out of the gate itself, they need to put that check and say whether this product meets it or not. Because otherwise, imagine you ship a product, you take an order, you ship a product, gets stuck in the customs, and you take it back. It's very expensive. So we do have, large organizations do have this dedicated global desk, global regulatory monitoring desk.
That happens when you start the development of a product.
Yes, it should happen. Yeah. So especially if you are in a very sensitive industry, if you are doing a product for a financial services, you do check that. If you are doing a product for a healthcare services, you check that. If you are developing something for a generic application, you don't start with that. Let's say I'm developing a ticketing solution, right? I don't necessarily need to worry about every geography. Is there any rule about ticketing solutions, right? These are fairly generic set of requirements. You know what it needs to get there. But now, as you do your marketing motion, as you do your sales motion, you've kind of captured initial market and so forth. Then your salespeople will come and tell you, hey, by the way, I can't sell your product in this market because here every ticket needs to have a particular information which your product doesn't have. So it comes with that. But if you are developing, let's say, a financial services package, then I will do a check and see what are the regulations, because these are highly regulated industries. So, and install-based customers. Remember, the CIOs typically shift companies once in 5 years, and they play golf a lot. So your install-based customers are very, very important. So that's about the portfolio 5 forces. I think let me do a quick time check. How much time do I have? I think maybe about half an hour, maybe, right? Okay, so this is the second one. Have you heard of this innovation lifecycle? Yeah. Right? Chasm. I saw in your website that Michael Eckhart actually gave you a talk on crossing the chasm. So I hope you all attended that, right? So what does it say? So this is from a famous book called Geoffrey Moore. So what did you say? An innovation is a bell curve. It starts with innovators. Your first product adoption happens from the innovators. Then you have early adapters. Then you get a chasm, right? It's very easy to do the first two. Then when you really have to scale your product, you get a chasm. And it talks about how to come out of the chasm. And a lot of this product die in because that's a signal. He talks about bowling alley. You identify a bowling pin, and then you go to the adjacencies and so forth. Then your product hits a tornado. So once it hits a tornado, that's the time when you determine how many players are going to be in the market. And after tornado, whoever survives the tornado, they go into the main street. So if you are a product manager with your salt, obviously, to get your product to the main street through all these life, correct? And once you get into the main street, he says the life of a product in the main street can be anywhere between 5 to 25 years, but he also says it can really vary. He gives an example of printed papers where the main street is going on for 90 years. So depending on your product, it can, and if you're lucky enough, or if the product is good enough, it can really last very, very long, non-stop. The product which I'm product manager for, it's probably in the late majority. It's in this phase, and guess what? This product is like now 43 years old, and so depending on what your product is, what industry you are in, and so on and so forth, your main street product can really last. It can actually mean your career. You can actually retire with that particular product in the main street. So you work hard for initial few years, and then you put it in the main street, and make sure you don't screw it up. You really can make sure that the product lasts very, very long. And that's what a successful product is. That forms at the end of the day. Here is when you actually make the money for the product. Here is when you actually make money for the company. So second framework. So when your product is in the main street, there are two things that you need to keep in mind. One is the +1 innovations. You really can't remain stagnant. Microsoft did not stop with Windows 95. I would imagine Windows 95 is when Microsoft reached the main street. That's when Windows did get into a market mode where everybody started using it. Everybody liked the product, GUI, all the great stuff. But you didn't stop with that, because you keep innovating. You keep making sure your product stays in time with the market, number one. And number two, you keep innovating so that you get the incremental revenue, which Geoffrey Moore calls as +1 innovation. What are +1 innovations? You have a core product which everybody buys, but there are some customers who want some additional features, and guess what? They're willing to pay for it. Correct? So for them, you not only do these evolutionary enhancements, you also make this +1 innovation so that you bring in additional facets of it. It could be a feature, it could be a model that you are allowing, a new consumption model you are allowing the customer to use. It could be very different things. I mean, just anything that you think is a great value to the customer, which is built on top of the core product, and for which the customer is willing to pay you extra money, right? iPhone gives you wireless headset. You get a headset with iPhone, but there are some people who are willing to pay you a wireless headset. How much do they charge for the wireless headset these days? How much is that? 12,000 rupees, right? It's serious money. How much money will they make in making that? Hardly any. Those are plus one innovations. I mean, they are equally applicable to enterprise products. It could be if you are a software stack company who bundle of software products, it could be edition. You have enterprise edition, you got business edition, you got web edition, you got data center edition. What are they? They basically, you have a core product that exactly does the same thing for as any other version of it, but it has some additional features that you can enable it by paying additional money and activating the license, and several different ways. So it's important that you look at the aspect of this plus one innovation, because they give you what is called as supernormal profits. The margins in plus one innovations can be extremely high. The other one that you need, disruptions. It's once you're in the main street, it becomes tempting to actually remain in the main street just by doing evolutionary changes. But not every company succeeds that way. You can have an industry where, go back to the protein model, you can be there could be a threat of substitution. There could be a new technology which came and which can really sort of make your product irrelevant. So how do you make sure that you compete with it? You battle it out. The one possible approach is disruptions. You know for a fact that you can make your product better than what the competition is, which is using the substitution technology. And that is where you look at disruption. Disruption is not easy. Disruption is to be extremely careful. What does disruption mean? Disruption means that, not going back? Okay. This means that your product, which is in the main street here, is coming back to bowling alley. You're basically changing the way the customer is consuming your product, using your product, deploying your product, following the process on your product. So that's disruption. An evolutionary change is not a disruption. Now, if you're making a customer do all that, you better have good reason to do it. Don't do disruption for the heck of it. But disruption is one strong way of sustaining your product in the middle of fierce competition, a fierce threat of substitution. So those are two angles that you need to keep in mind when you're in the main street, and that's equally applicable to the enterprise product. The third angle in enterprise, if you read Phil Kotler, do you read Phil Kotler in one of your curriculums for marketing? So what does it take about buying behavior in enterprises? He says there are 5 people when you do enterprise buying. They are developers, they are influencers, they are purchasers, they are users, and they are decision makers. So this is a big difference in the enterprise world compared to the consumer world. How many people you have in the consumer world? Typically 1, the buyer, or sometimes it could be 2. Influencers there, but influencers are there. Yeah. Well, they're not as powerful necessarily. So in the case of enterprises, this is something that is extremely crucial. Remember, you have a lot of you may be already running a startup, or a lot of you may be planning to get into a startup. So if you want a solution to be, if you want your product to be used by the big guys, could be Bharti Airtel, could be Indian Oil. Do you think they let you to go talk to the CIO directly with the value proposition? They don't. There are gatekeepers. There are people who say, there are people in the organization who've actually approved the sellers in that organization. And without they being approved, you can't even go and talk to any of the people inside who are users of your product. So they're typically people who are, who manage the alliances, as they call it, or they are sometimes they can even be purchasing group. I mean, purchasing group is a very different function inside of organization. And there are lawyers in there. And lawyers can really make your life hell. And because a lot of the big enterprises not only are bureaucratic, they're also extremely legally savvy. Have you heard of unlimited liability? So when you are selling a product to the company, they put a nice clause in the agreement called it's unlimited liability, which means if your product goes and creates a loss for them, you're going to replenish the loss. Let's say you are selling a server which is going to run an ATM for a bank and the ATM goes down for 2 days and the bank earns money out of the ATMs, you're going to make good that loss. That's unlimited liability. It could be 2 days, 1 month, whatever. So, of course, without signing it, your product can't even get in there. The product can't even get in there. So, which means it's only the big guys who can deal with these people. So, if you are a small startup, then you got to think about how do I bring my product to a stage where somebody can write this check in on my behalf or sign this agreement on my behalf. So you get this mode of resellers. You talk to the Infosys and the Wipros who really have strong balance sheets and who know what an unlimited liability is. And then you get into the mode of sort of, oh, okay, now if you want to make an entry, you got to make an entry through somebody else, through a partnership, right? Through a resale agreement. So that's the dynamics at play in large enterprises. Now, the users and the buying decision is actually a group decision. Have you heard of this thing called beauty pageant?
Yeah.
What does it do? What's the beauty pageant? Miss World is a beauty pageant, but in the business, what's a beauty pageant in the business? Okay, so beauty pageant is a term that is used in this purchasing decision where you have different dimensions of people. There is a CIO, there is a user, there is a guy from the purchasing group, there's a lawyer, there is an influencer. All these people come and rate you. You know how Miss World is chosen, right? There are the people in the panel who will come and rate her based upon whatever she answers or whatever questions and different dimensions. At the end of the day, you don't know what was the factor that a particular person was chosen. So that's a typical purchasing behavior. That's a typical purchasing process in large enterprises. You got these people who form a purchasing group, a deciding group of different functions. There is a purchasing function, there's a legal function, there are the user system admins, and there are the CIO's representatives. They will come and make a decision on whether to go with product A or product B or a product C. So which means your product should be multidimensional. So your product is not only something which the user loves, your product should also have the facets of it which the decision maker likes. What does he like? A strong balance sheet. What does he like? Strong promoters, right? You get a product into the organization and the promoter doesn't have a great track record, it disappears, right? Is it a limited company? Is it a private company? Or how many employees are there? And how many users are there? It could be a great product, but if there are not many users today, they're going to be very skeptical. So those are the dimensions that come into play when you work in a business to business model. So some of the other characteristics of enterprise software, again, I'm talking about software here. When you talk about software, broadly you can classify them as the operating system and virtualization, the database and the middleware and the application. These are large size solutions, can be complex. Support is critical part of the offering. Do you have support that is follow the sun? What is follow the sun? 24/7 where? Across the globe. Do I have a local number to call? Support is extremely critical. Can you give me mission critical support? Can you come back to me within 2 hours if I give you a call? Your engineer should come to my site and be there. That's very, very critical. And guess what? Companies make more money and more margin out of support than they make of the product. Okay, support is extremely critical. High stickiness. Let's say you have a payroll software running in Indian Oil or IRCTC. How many people have used or not used IRCTC? How many people have not used IRCTC? You have not used. Okay, so why am I taking the example? If IRCTC runs a HPE server called OpenVMS. Have you heard of this operating system, OpenVMS? That's probably the same, it had the origin at the same time as Nonstop. and HP wants to withdraw the support for it, but it's not going to be so easy because how soon can ISRC move out of that system? How soon can they move? Never. High stickiness. So getting your foot on the door is extremely difficult. But remember, once you're in there, if you really do a good job of it, nobody can kick you out. There's another classic example that one of our GMs told us about one of the defense project in the US. I won't be able to give you more details about it, but again, what he said was this was an operating system which they really wanted to kill, but the US government defense said, tell me the price. Tell me the price that you need to keep it alive. And he quoted a fancy price, said, okay, take it. So that's the beauty of these enterprise. So stickiness, preference for large suppliers. And I've given you an example about why preference for large suppliers exist. If there is a certain premium that you can charge if you are an HPE or an IBM or a Google or an Oracle compared to anybody else. Contract enforcement. Contract enforcement is extremely crucial. You can't get away with nonsense. They will come after you. So you can get away with selling a phone will probably blow in a developing country like India. Unfortunate, but it does happen. But these are contract enforcement is extremely crucial. That's where the lawyers are important. Insurance is very important. You need to have a strong balance sheet. Insurance costs you a lot. And long lead times. They are not something which you can sell in a day or a 2 day or a week it takes years to make a headway. Years. I mean, if you talk to the account teams, they'll really tell you a lot of bruises and a lot of pains they go through to make the first sale in a large corporate. It's very, very important. And you've got to be persuasive. You've got to be extremely tenacious. If you are in the sales, if you are into business development, and if tenacity is not your strength, you'd rather not go there if it's a B2B space. So the other one is the other aspect to this is something Eckhart would have emphasized a lot. The minimum viable whole product. What does it mean? It's your core product is good, but it's not good enough. There are a bunch of products and services that complement it, which are extremely essential win your product if you want to be a winner. And he gives you it tells you several types of complementary product. It could be hardware, it could be a software, it could be peripheral, it could be connectivity. You can't sell. Again, I come to the consumer space because it's easy to actually relate to rather than in the enterprise space. I mean, you can't sell a mobile phone without a charger. You can't sell a mobile phone without a headset. And something I don't really understand is why are they not selling a mobile phone without a screen guard, which is extremely essential. And I still don't understand that aspect. But they all come under complementary products. Some of these may be the small items, but they can really make a difference between a winner and a loser. We spoke about the post-sale service and support. Customer success in enterprise, it's extremely important that you should have a viable reference. There has to be a customer reference that you should be able to provide to the customer, to a prospect upon query, because customers are extremely risk averse. They want to know how your product, where your products are deployed, and have they been deployed in my geography, in my country? Have they been deployed for how long? How long have they been deployed, and what's been the experience? Can I talk to that CIO or can I talk to that administrator in that or a admin manager in that company and see what he thinks about your product? It's very important. So you got to have these positive references. Again, you can ask for the first time. Yes, first time is very difficult. So you make some little compromises. You white label your product, right? You put their brand sticker on the product and go, because he has already got that trust. So various ways to actually overcome that. Legacy interfaces. Your product looks great in a TCP/IP world, but guess what? This customer is running on X25 still. Can you talk on X25? I can't. Sorry, I can't meet the product because there's a competitor out there who has got a partner who works on X25, he was given an adapter for your product. That works. And he charges, guess what, 10 times the premium. But customer has no choice. So legacy interfaces. In enterprises, it's very crucial. It's very important. A lot of enterprises are running age-old system because you know what? Replacing that is much more expensive than paying that little premium and getting an existing product talk to it. So legacy interfaces, legacy systems are very essential. Support for that. So coming back, the whole product is equal to the core product plus enables. So minimum viable whole product. Keep that in mind. This is something that's extremely crucial when you look at a product design. Yes, please.
How easy or difficult is it to build these legacy interfaces? Because yes, most of the other companies are on legacy platforms, and you're trying to sell a new product. So if you want them to buy it, you want to legacy interfaces. But what's the cost of building this?
If you are building it on your own, the cost can be prohibitive. And that is when you partner with others. You go look around the market and see either somebody who sells that adapter for a standard TCP/IP, and talk to that person and say, hey, can you develop an adapter for my product?
So there are companies who are actually developing adapters specifically.
Yes, absolutely. Innovator's Dilemma. Have you read this framework? Clayton Christensen. Okay, so what does it say? So this was another classic that was written in the 90s. So what does it say? Every product goes through this cycle called the time versus performance. When PCs were introduced, if you have seen the history of computers, PCs were occupying the whole room, right? IBM PC and all that. Then they got miniaturized. So when any product is introduced, the market performance requirement is at a certain level. The black line here is the market requirement of the performance. But guess what? There's no product in the market. So customer will buy yours because it's the closest that he can get in the market. So what happens? So as time passes by, you evolve your product. You make it faster, you make it bigger, you make it better, you make it efficient. So you evolve your product. So your performance trajectory goes up and meets the point that the customer requires it. It's a meet the point where it meets the customer's expectation. But guess what? You don't stop there. You keep on evolving your product and make it faster and faster. I mean, it could be 2.7 gigahertz processor yesterday. It could be, 3 gigahertz processor today and 3.3 gigahertz processor tomorrow. To the point that customers don't even need it so fast. I mean, Porsche runs at 300 miles an hour. How many people can actually drive at 300 miles an hour? Right? So, but Porsche's value proposition is, I make the fastest car on the planet. But people still buy and pay that premium, knowing fully well that in Bangalore they can't go at more than 10 kilometers an hour. Because that brand matters, a Porsche car. So, it goes beyond the trajectory. But guess what? There is a competitor who comes in with a substitution. So he makes a cheaper product, which is far cheaper than what this fellow is offering you, the battery operated car today. So it is far below what the customer's expectation is. I mean, I want to go out to the town once in a month, once in 6 months. I really can't use my battery operated car. So, well, I can't use this car. So it's not for me. But there are people who say, well, I like the environment. They're the early adopters. You know the cycle? Early adopters. So I like the environment. I don't mind. I take the train anyway on the weekends if I go long distance. So they use it. But guess what? These cars, these products keep on evolving. They make the battery last longer. They have more charging points to the point that they also come and meet the customer's expectation. But guess what? A Maruti or a Porsche, they think, well, I'm here. If I have to develop a car which is as good as this one with a battery, it's going to cannibalize my product. It's going to cannibalize my existing product line. My sales guy is not going to sell it because they make bigger margins on those bigger and gigantic products. They don't sell it. So this is the scope for a challenger in the industry to come in and take over the leader. So if you look at the floppy disk industry, initially it was how many inches were? Do you remember seeing 5.2 inches floppy disks? Okay, so all right. I thought I'm very old in the class. So Then came what? 3.5 inches. Then came some 1 point something. But you know what? Each guy who became successful in that market is a different one. The company which made 5.2 inches went out of the market when the 3.5 inches came. The same company could not make it. Yes, but it's the same technology. It's the same magnet. Why? Because he was more busy on making it bigger and more dense. Whereas this guy came and said, the customers don't need such a capacity. They need a smaller disk. So he made this other product. So same thing in the computer industry. Who initially made IBM made the computers. But you remember the IBM term planned obsolescence? The arrogance? They said, look, I am not going to, when Intel came to IBM and said, I have a more recent chip, a modern chip now. Can you put that in your computer and market it? I said, no, our customers are not ready for it. Because they were the big gorilla in that time. But Intel went and told Compaq, can you do it? Compaq was a hungry lion over there, young guy. Said, yeah, why not? Let me get in there. So IBM overcame Compaq in the PC industry. Then what? When supply chain evolution came, who overtook Compaq after the supply chain evolution? Just in time. JIT, Dell, just in time. So they made computers so cheap that this Compaq just couldn't compete with them. So you got to be watchful. When you are in product management, you got to be very, very careful. These threat of substitution. You read about threat of substitution. This is how it typically happens. You have a competing technology which is not good enough. Intel, for example, today Intel versus ARM, not good enough. ARM is still very weak, not very powerful. But guess what? If you keep working on your product, it can really reach a point where it meets customers' expectation. At the end of the day, what matters to the customer is, does it meet my expectation? Can I do my morning job with that, day job with that? If that's the case, and if it's available at a cheaper price or a better, the shape or a size, I'll go with it. Why not? So the innovator's dilemma. Basically, it's a very classic book. If you get a chance, if you have a library here, just go read that. Very readable book. Again, something which is a must read for product managers. Other than the one on Jeffrey Moore, Crossing the Chasm. 2 great books on product management. Please read them if you have. That gives you a good overview about some of the things that you need to do. You need to keep in mind as product managers.
The problem is over the incremental innovation, even if it's lower end of product, it becomes the higher end product.
It does. Yes.
Because even those companies actually started here and
yes. There is no balance. There is no balance. If you are a successful company, you really have to watch out for this. And that is why today all diesel car makers, petrol car makers are doing electric. Why? Because if they don't do it, somebody else will do, and they'll put them out of the market. Same is true with autonomous cars. All the incumbent autonomous cars, they are incumbent combustion engine car, IC cars. They are making autonomous cars. But if they don't do it, somebody else is going to make it, throw them out of the market. Cloud. So stopping HP and Dell from offering infrastructure as a service. And why did Amazon come? Amazon Web Services, right? For HP and IBM, it was very logical because they make the computers, they make the servers on their own. What stopped them from offering them as a service model? This one. Amazon came, they gave a cloud service. Well, performance wasn't great. I had to go through my data link to access my servers. So my data was somewhere in the web. I have to depend on my faster net. But guess what? Today, network is like commodity. At home, I get 100 Mbps. I don't know what to do with it. Right? You got gigabit. You have gigabit networks these days. So gigabit is the same thing that runs in data centers. So it doesn't really matter. Innovation takes over. And Amazon Web Services today is a $25 billion market for them, revenue. They are running a success. So that's very important. When your technology cycle is getting refreshed, and when your substitution, Porter's Substitution is becoming a real threat for your product. Please.
Within HP, that part of infrastructure service was an established market. You would have thought about it well ahead of time, right? Also, you would have had discussion.
Yeah.
But then, the third way coming into the market, you would have, there should be some reason why HP didn't go into that space, right?
Yeah.
Is it the problem that you are too much into the problem space that you cannot think of that's of the challenges?
What are the reasons that you didn't
really do it?
Well, there could be multiple reasons. I was not there in the in the HP management. Yeah, no, I understand. I understand your question. But what I'm saying is that if I can be mean to HPE, I can give reasons why it would have happened. But I don't want to be mean to. Yeah. So keeping the disclaimers. Imagine I am a sales guy today in HP. I make my money, I make my margin, I make my commission by selling servers. Can I tell my sales guy to go and sell cloud? By the way, HP did have a public cloud. HP did have a public cloud. If I tell my sales guy to sell the public to sell the servers and tell him to sell the cloud, how is he going to sell it? If he's selling the cloud service, he's going to make $100 in 2 years because it's a rental model. Or if I tell sell the server today, I'm going to make $100 today. So which one will I sell? So, which means you not only need to introduce a product, your structure should also be tuned to that. Your incentive structure, your sales structure, you got to really redesign your whole enterprise to actually meet that. Now, somebody has to be strategically extremely smart and extremely brilliant to know that it's really going to happen. Amazon is really going to eat my lunch. And that's not easy.
It's just not a product, it's totally.
Yeah, remember at that time HP was a $130 billion company. We used to make PCs, servers, we used to make printers, we used to make million different things. So for a CEO who's sitting there and looking at his quarterly numbers, he has many things to worry about rather than one little piece which is getting threatened because of Amazon. So that is when you basically fly below the radar. If you are a challenger, you fly below the radar until you become really big. So that's how it works. And it is easy to say these things in a class. I'm pretty sure people who are sitting, uneasy lies the head which bears the crown. People who are sitting in that place and position must have been extremely difficult for them to actually take a call. So those are some theoretical part. Something about nonstop. Again, this is a 4 decades old product line. We are mission critical, highest availability in the industry period. If you look at availability level today, the highest availability is offered by probably 2 platforms, HP Nonstop and IBM Mainframe. Now, this is the Gartner's report. I think the last one came out in 2014 or 15. But what it basically says is that this availability level, AL4, what it says is that this is a market which is not growing. It is actually declining very slowly. About 3% every year on year it is declining. But it's a fairly large market. I mean, it's about $3.3 billion market today. So if you go back to the chasm the chasm graph, the bell curve, so we are basically at a late majority. So we are somewhere between the late and decline. Now, if you have in that kind of a business, so you again, I take you back to Clayton Christensen's talk about innovation. So we are highest available, but if you look at AL3, which is one level below, who are the players over there? VMware, and even below Microsoft, Red Hat, and look at what they make. VMware made 8 billion last year, and they're growing. Microsoft in their operating system made 32 billion, and they're growing. IBM Red Hat made 3.4, and they're growing. So what it means is customers today meet their availability requirement using the cheaper alternate solutions, and the solutions are, because they're available at a much lower price point, they are scaled out to such a large extent that those companies operate in that are growing. Whereas the people who are operating in the AL4 space, IBM Nonstop is a company called Stratus, and IBM Mainframe, they are declining, right? So basically, which means there is an innovator's dilemma happening here. There are these lower price alternatives which are eventually taking over and becoming mainstream. So, so what do we do? If you look at a hardware and software company, most of our revenue comes from software. We have a complete stack: operating system, security, management, data protection, database, Java middleware. We were predominantly a software company. We make as well. Until about 2017, our solution was running only on our own hardware, our own proprietary hardware. So what did we do? So we were here. So we were somewhere in the later half of the main street. So what did we do? Now we are going back. We are actually doing a very disruptive change. So now we are saying, look, world has gone virtualized. We have, whereas Nonstop has been very bare metal. We don't support. We're not supporting virtualization. We don't support cloud service. You can't use Nonstop in an as a service model. So what we're doing now is we are disrupting. We are saying that, look, we are going to embrace virtualization. You can deploy Nonstop now on any infrastructure which is virtualized, which means you no longer have to purchase an HPE Nonstop server to deploy your Nonstop workload. And you can also do some of the as a service model, like for example, database as a service. You can have a large system which can have multiple instances of the database, isolated database, so that you can have customers utilizing it more efficiently. So value proposition. So large enterprises need mission critical, but we also now want to go after the mid-tier enterprises, which also require mission critical, but they were not able to afford the price of a Nonstop. A Nonstop system is a very expensive system. So, and the new models, mission critical workload in private cloud, and database as a service, newer as a service options. And we also go back to the first slide I spoke about the influences. So today the number of solutions number of ISVs which develop solutions on Nonstop are a very small number compared to number of solutions that run on, let's say, a Red Hat Linux or an Oracle or on Microsoft OS. So now with this lowering of the entry barrier, we are also now attracting the ISVs and say, look, you've developed your solutions on my platform, you make your solution mission critical out of the box, and thereby we want to increase the ability, increase the prospects of Nonstop being deployed in a much more diverse set of industries. So basically, this is a market expansion strategy, and we are trying to do that with a little bit of a disruption. So that is some application of some of these theories and the frameworks in the HPE product line where I work. So that concludes my my talk. And any questions I have not answered so far? This presentation has not answered. Let me know. What is the day in the life of a product manager? So typically you have multiple projects ongoing. Look, some project could be you might be writing a MRD, market requirements. Look at what does it take for you to keep your product current, make it more appealing to the customers. That's one part of the work. Second part of the work is sometimes it can be a fire drill as well. A field coming and telling you, hey, the customer has this requirement, there's a deal that's going on, and does my product meet this requirement? It's too technical for me. Can you help me out? That sort of thing. The rest of them are like regular mundane stuff. But if I were to say these are the ones which keep you excited, one is to creating those MRDs and being a part of those product teams which make newer and newer enhancement to your product, and the second one is helping the field to sell. Actually, if Kotler says the role of a product manager and the marketer. The role of a product manager is you make the beans so that birds get attracted to it, and the role of a marketer is to make sure. The role of a bean is to make sure birds really enjoy the food. The role of the marketer is to make it attractive to the birds, so that birds will come and eat them. So that's the role of product. Basically, making sure that your product, when the customer buys them, meets the requirement. Okay.
get these frameworks
Well, involuntarily you do apply. Well, do I look at do I look at Porter's model every single day? No. But when you do make these decisions, you do apply these models. So the reason why I brought these models is because you would have learned these models in your classes, so it's easier to probably apply that and see how the real world works. None of these are perfect models, and this model will give you a track to use some methodologies to make decisions. Yeah.
About 4 years, 4 years are now, 2019. Is there a plan for the product?
Integrity.
So you have to slice
This one. This one. Yeah.
So I was asking if there are 2020 plan.
Well, good question. So, in the 43 years, integrity is the fourth platform we're introducing, and right now, our challenge has been to migrate our installed base, which is on Itanium, to integrity. So today, even a large part of my installed base is still running on Itanium. So before I even make a new platform, do I have a need to do it today? Virtualization is my new platform. Virtualize nonstop is my new platform. And on the hardware side, do I need to make do I have a dire need to make a new platform today? No. So what do? My focus is to now make sure my integrity adoption is far better than what it is today. That's my focus. That's where I apply my resources. Okay? Yeah.
When you get a new product idea, so what are the various things that because product market research and everything so various things would be involved. So what is the role of the product manager? Because they be taking care of existing product idea. So when the new product idea, so how they take it forward? What are the things they do? How the product manager is able to take it to a product.
Yeah. So there is some.
B2B was different when compared to B2C.
So in the case of you don't develop products, every week or every month, or typically our new products have a frequency of once in a year or once in a couple of years or once in 3 years, because it's a very rigorous journey to make a product, and the trigger is basically what's the hole in my portfolio. Is there a hole in my portfolio that is really making my field not able to sell my product? And is there a dire need for me to do it? And there is also something known as opportunity cost. My resources are limited. My R&D budget is limited. And if I had to spend a dollar, will I spend it on making a new product which will help me make better sales, or which is going to make me better sales, filling this particular gap in the portfolio, or making my existing product better, make it much more focused? So those are the ones that at a high level you think before you even venture into, hey, I want to make this product and this is how I'm going to define it. So that decision itself is a very crucial decision, and typically the frequency is once in a year or once in 2 years, and of that nature. It's not frequent. For example, in the case of a consumer product, you got Samsung coming up with models every 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. It just doesn't happen in B2B. The product offtake is extremely slow. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, but usually, suppose the product idea came to the customer team. So what is the way that you will convince a business development? So you need to do multiple things to convince your business development or sales team to do it.
Well, business development, obviously, if you have to convince the business development, you got to do a thorough job of your market research, thorough job of how much revenue is your product is going to make. Ultimately, basically the same set of decisions. Have you heard of discounted cash flow? You would have heard of discounted cash flows, right? The NPVs, the IRRs. So do I meet these? Can I meet my IRR by making this particular product? So those are the ones that you need to put together and convince your management before you do what is called as a contract approval. We have a process known as contract approval. So that is the research part that you need to do before even a single engineer is put on that particular job. It's a very rigorous exercise to let new resources be attached to a new product development.
So when the customers go into the cloud infrastructure, right, you are focusing on virtualization. So how big is the gap? How much and moving to cloud and also supporting virtualization?
So virtualization is an enabler for you to go into the cloud. Today you have cloud services, but guess what? They're all VMs. So if you're not supporting virtualization, you can't even offer anything as a service so easily. Which vendor?
Say like Amazon Web Service.
Huh.
So they are doing a virtualization but you can't go to the business customers and then sell this to cloud provider.
Amazon offers what is called as an infrastructure as a service. It gives you VMs, it gives you Windows VMs, and it gives you. But imagine if Windows is not even able to run as a guest operating system. How can Amazon give a Windows VM? So virtualization is the enabler. Because Windows can be run as a guest operating system in a VM, Amazon can offer cloud as Windows OS as a service, Windows VM as a service. Nonstop until recently, until 2017 at least, was not even deployable as a VM, as a guest OS in a VM. Now it supports it. So what does it mean? I mean, Nonstop is not something which you can put in a public cloud. We are not a commodity operating system. It's a fairly complex system. So, but you can put it in a private cloud. If you have a private cloud infrastructure in your enterprise, and customers are unlikely to put a lot of the Nonstop workload in the public cloud. You're talking about the bank's ATMs. You won't put that in the public cloud, right? You're talking about financial gateways. Those things don't typically go into the public cloud, but they go into the private cloud because today enterprises all want to be in a cloudy infrastructure. And if your Nonstop is not ready for that, it still requires your private proprietary box to deploy the solution. Your CIOs are not going to like it because everybody wants to be standardized. And that's where my virtualization comes into the picture. So otherwise, we get tagged into what is called a legacy operating system. And our initiative is to move out of that and make it modern and deployable as a service solution. Any other question I've left unanswered? Nope. Okay. Thank you.